Hello, students of the University of Embu. My name is Jeremy Robbins, and on behalf of our team at TheraP Global, I want to thank you all for inviting us here today to talk about data management and technology in special education. We have a great lecture ahead of you in store. To start, I'd like to introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Jeremy Robbins, and I am the Director of Business Development for TheraP Global's work in Africa and the Americas. As part of my work, I work with special education schools, therapy centers, vocational training centers, empowerment organizations, and other groups in Africa and the Caribbean to help build our TheraP Global community. Before joining TheraP, I worked at multiple United States embassies, primarily focusing on their environment, science, technology, and health centers. But I'm so glad to be here today, and I will also be joined virtually by my colleagues, Shay Dotson, who is the Assistant Director of Person-Centered Practices here at TheraP, as well as Johanna Croth, the Director of Global Implementation, and Alphonsus de Alban, who is the school authority at St. Philomena School in the Philippines, as well as being the TheraP Global representative in the Philippines. We have a great lecture in store for you all, but first let me tell you a little bit more about TheraP Global and what we are as a company. So TheraP is the world's leading electronic documentation system for organizations supporting persons with disabilities. Basically, people use our system to keep track of the people they provide support for and how they are progressing in their supports. We work with over 7,000 organizations, ranging from governments in the United States to organizations with just one person. And we work with people all around the world. Like I said, including schools, therapy centers, vocational training organizations, and more. We have users in Kenya, as well as Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, all the way in Nigeria and Ghana, down in South Africa. We also have users in the United States, in Canada, in the Bahamas, as well as Bangladesh, Philippines, Nepal, and even more countries. So we really are a global organization. And one of the benefits of being so global is we are able to have conversations with different types of organizations that are working in different ways to provide support for people with disabilities. And we are able to learn about what the best practices are in different parts of the world, what are the challenges that people are facing, and how they use technology and better data to try to overcome those challenges in providing supports. So with all of that expertise and experience, like I said, we've been operating since 2003, so close to 2 decades worth of experience. We have built today's lecture for all of you who are looking to become special educators in Kenya in mind. And so for today's lecture, we will be covering quite a bit of information. We will be starting by talking about the fundamentals of data management. Then we will be getting into how you can use technology to keep high quality data and what high quality data means. We're also going to talk about what it means to collect student-centered data. And that's where Shay, who is one of the world's leading experts on person-centered planning and person-centered practices, will be giving a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise on that topic. We'll then turn it over to my colleague, Johanna, who has been working for many, many decades in this field, helping people with disabilities. And she's going to give some background on how to build individualized education plans. This is something that she consults with schools all over the world about. And so she really has tremendous wealth of experience to speak on this topic. Then I will get into unlocking the power of data using technology. And I'll show you some screenshots from inside the TheraP Global system. We will also hear from Al with how they are actually using technology to improve their data management at their school and what that means in terms of how they're able to help their students and improve communication as an organization. That will tie nicely into our sixth subject, which is improving communication with better data management. And this will be a topic that hopefully will get you thinking in some different ways, not just improving communication within your school, but also with family and other people providing supports to your students. So now that we have this overview, there seems to be no better way than to get started by talking about the fundamentals of data management. But before we do so, I do want to mention, as this is a live stream, our team will be available if you have any comments, questions, really anything that you want to bring up with us. We are in this YouTube stream, so you have the ability to ask a comment in the live stream, and our team is here to answer your questions. So we encourage you, ask away. If there's something that you want more information about, something that doesn't make sense, really anything, feel free to ask us, and we will try our best to either answer the question or point you in the resource of a question, of an answer that will help you out. So I think that gets us started for today. Without any further ado, we will jump into our first topic. So in this section, we are going to talk about the fundamentals of data management. We're going to learn what data is relevant for teachers, and how you might collect that data. So it's going to be a great way to start off today's lecture. So first, let's start by talking about what is data. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, data is the factual information, such as measurements or statistics, that are used as a basis for reasoning, discussion, or calculation. Basically, data is information that you collect that can be used for further analysis or discussion. And data can take on a lot of different forms. It's a very flexible term. It could be written information. It can be numbers, statistics, measurements. It can also be photographs or videos. There's a lot of variety to what data is. And we'll be talking more about what might be useful for teachers and people out of school to keep track of. So at FairUp Global, we work with schools all around the world. We work with teachers in the United States, in Kenya, down in South Africa, all the way to the Philippines and Bangladesh. And we work with schools of different sizes, some government schools, some non-government schools. So we really get a lot of different perspectives in terms of what they're collecting. And the answer is there is not just one set of information that all schools keep track of. Different teachers keep track of different things. Different schools have different rules, and even different governments may require different things for their schools to keep track of. But these are some of the most common types of data that we see when we talk to different teachers around the world. Number one is basic profile information. So odds are, when you go teach at a school, you're already keeping track of this information, and you may just not know it's called basic profile information. So that includes things like a student's name, a student's birthday, so you can keep track of how old they are, and where they live. It includes some other things, but it tends to be that basic foundational building blocks to help you understand who is someone on a very basic level. We also have relevant contact information. And so this can depend a lot based on the student. It might be their parents, it might be an uncle or an aunt, or a different family member that serves as their guardian. It may also include different types of therapists, like a speech therapist or a behavioral therapist or an occupational therapist, or someone else that's providing support for them in their life. The way to think about this is, who might be important for me as a school teacher to reach out to if there's a problem in the classroom? If I want to share a student's progress, who might I be interested in reaching out to? And you also would be surprised at how much you can learn from other members of the student support network. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later on, but that's why it can be very useful to have that relevant contact information saved. So that includes, how do we reach them, who they are? That type of information can be very valuable as you're teaching. We also have academic progress, which is probably very obvious to you as someone becoming a teacher, and it's probably been talked about throughout this course, but academic progress is a really important piece of data to keep track of for your students. And this can take many different forms. It can be simply recording a student's grade. You may even create what's called an individual education plan. And my colleague Johanna Croft will be speaking more about that later on, and that will be really valuable discussion that she'll be sharing. But with academic progress, what you essentially want to know is, what is the student's baseline for success? Where are we trying to go? And how are they doing on that journey? And the important part of keeping data is it helps you know, how are we doing in terms of this progress? Let's say we are teaching a student how to learn the different shapes, and we are testing them on that. We would want some form of data to help us understand, are they learning what a triangle is? Are they learning what a rectangle is? Keeping track of that information will help us know as teachers, are we doing a good job? Do we need to change the way that we're teaching this subject? Or are we doing it right and it's being effective and we just need to keep going? Having data is essential for knowing, is the student making progress? And should we keep using this method that we are currently using? It's also helpful that you can show administrators, here's the progress of my students, and you can even share with families, look at how great your family member is progressing. So academic progress is very important. We also have personal preferences and goals. And my colleague Shay will be speaking about this in her section, but it's so important to think more broadly than just academic progress. As a teacher, we obviously want to help a student learn whatever the subject we are teaching them is, but we also want to understand who they are as a person, who they are outside of the classroom. What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What are their goals in life? And how can we as a teacher play a part in achieving those goals and helping them learn in a way that they like and avoid things they dislike? Not only will keeping track of this information, of these personal preferences, help the student have a more enriched experience, but it will also help make your job as a teacher easier and more effective, because you will have a better way of connecting with your students. On this list, we also have health information. And this really varies by schools, but we talk to a lot of schools that maybe administer medications or want to keep track of emergency medical information, right? So if you are offering food at the school, you would want to know someone's allergies. This can be information that is literally life or death, whether or not you know what it is. And so that's why it's so important to keep track of this data and know how to access it. So come mealtime, you can look through and see what people's allergies are. Or if you're offering medication, if you're providing medication, you can look through and know exactly what student is supposed to receive exactly what type of medication. So health information really can be quite important. Last on this list, we have required supports. And this can vary a lot by student and by school in terms of what you're looking to provide support for. But essentially, with required supports, we're talking about things such as, does someone have any physical mobility guidelines? Do they need to make sure we have someone helping them get up and down stairs? Maybe they have supervision guidelines. They can't be left on their own. We have to make sure someone is watching them during playtime so they don't do something and potentially hurt themselves. There's also things to keep track of, such as communication modality, right? So you may be interested in knowing, how do we talk to a student? How do we help a student communicate with us? There's a lot of different ways of thinking about these supports, but it is really important to keep track of for each student. So that is required supports. And I'm sure there are other types of categories as well. And if you can think of any, please feel free to let us know. We're always looking to learn more about types of data that are relevant for teachers. So now that we've talked about the types of data that you might be interested in collecting, let's talk about why this is so important. And I've mentioned some of this as we were going through, but having high quality, well-managed data is the key to providing strong supports. And I think an important part of that sentence is well managed. You can collect all the data that you want, but if you don't have a way of going through and easily finding that information, it's not going to be helpful for you. As a student, if you're keeping notes, you might have 4 or 5 binders that are this tall. But if you're unable to go through and find what notes are important, it doesn't matter if you wrote them down. And that's why management is so crucial. And technology can be such a great tool in helping you manage that information. So another reason data as a teacher is so important is because every student and every classroom setting is unique. Right now in school, you're learning how to become a teacher, but when you actually join a classroom, you'll find that there's not one plan that can work for every class and every student. Everyone is a little bit different. Whether they have some sort of learning challenge or physical disability, doesn't matter. You're going to have to think about a unique way of providing supports for each of them. And data can help you understand if that support is being successful or if it's unsuccessful and it needs to be altered. But the only way you can make that decision is if you have information that you can look at and think to yourself, maybe I should be changing this or I should be continuing to do this. Another reason why data is important is because it gives you a concrete piece of information that you can share with your fellow teachers, that you can share with your administrators, that you can share with other members of the student support network. And that way you're improving communication and you can know if the student, maybe there's a student that was having a very bad day in class and you didn't know why. It would be so helpful if you could have a piece of data from someone else, maybe a family member, and know, well, they recently lost their grandparent and that's why they're acting out today. Having that sharing of data can really make your job easier and can also improve the lives of the students that you are working with. So that is some of the reasons why data is so important. Let's talk about methods for storing data. Historically, the main way to collect data is pen and paper. And we talk to schools all over the world that show us entire bookshelves filled with binders after binder, filled with information about their students. And what they say is, we've collected all this information, but now it's a very big challenge for us to actually go through and find anything. And so that's one of the limitations to pen and paper. Another limitation is if you write something down on pen and paper, it can be lost, it can accidentally be erased or destroyed, or it might fall into the wrong person's hands. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next section, about how to have good data. But I did want to mention there are some limitations to using pen and paper. Just a few others off the top of to be mindful of. One is if you write something on pen and paper and you want to share it with someone else, that means you either have to make a copy of it and then give it to them, or they have to find that physical piece of paper. If you're working in a large school and you want to have communication, that can become a problem. And another challenge for using pen and paper is that if someone either accidentally or on purpose changes the information to make it incorrect, you have no way of telling who did that and when that record was falsified. So that can be another problem with pen and paper. A growing trend that we see a lot of schools using is what we call offline electronic documentation tools. So offline means that it is not connected to the internet. So something can be electronic, but not connected to the internet. And a great example of that is something like Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word. Those are tools where if you want to write down a short written report or maybe enter in some scores, you're able to do so and save it as a file. But because it is offline, it is not automatically shared with other people in your network. And so if you want to share it with them, you would have to send it via email or add it to a shared network like a Google Drive. And so that has its pros and its cons. One of the pros of an offline electronic documentation tool is if you are working in a setting that has very poor internet and maybe only one computer, it might not matter if you have to share a file on different devices because you only have one device. And if you're not connected to the internet, then you would not be able to access an online documentation tool. So in that case, you might prefer an offline electronic documentation tool like Excel or Microsoft Word. But one of the challenges is it's much harder to share information and keep track of version history. Let's say I wrote a note about how one of my students was doing today, and I wanted my principal to see what that note said. And so I saved it on Microsoft Word, and then I emailed it to the principal. Well, if I make an edit to that file, the principal will have no way of seeing that edit unless I send a new version. Similarly, if the principal makes an edit on the file, I would have no way of seeing that unless they send it to me. And that's one of the challenges of an offline electronic documentation tool. It's very easy to lose track of what the correct version is because you're sending files back and forth and you're not updating things in real time. So that brings us to the type of system that FairApp is. And we really pride ourselves on making the most of the available technologies to help people with their data management. So with online electronic data management, you are uploading information, you're uploading your data online in such a way so that when you enter an information, it is immediately seen by other people that are in your network. So this might be FairApp, what we do at FairApp Global, but it may also be Google Drive is a great example. If you update a Google Sheet, other people in your organization will immediately be able to see those updates. And this can really help with communication. You're also able to look back and see what edits have been made by different people. So you keep track of accountability. And all of those can be important assets in making sure your data is well managed and it's high quality. Another benefit both with offline and online electronic documentation is it's much easier to search for materials because you can just type into the search bar with whatever system you're using the name of the file and it will pull up for you. So that's another thing to consider if you're collecting a lot of information. So now that we've talked about some of the ways of collecting data, let's think about what we might actually be collecting as a teacher. A common thing would be a narrative report. A lot of teachers have a journal where they keep track of their students' progress and they write maybe 2 or 3 sentences about the student every day. That's a classic way of being able to look back and see how someone is doing with some detail. You also have grades. So Johanna will be talking about IEPs. Grades and IEPs can oftentimes go hand in hand, but some way of using a score to keep track of how your student is doing. We also have pictures and videos of a student. So this can be their behavior. It can be a piece of work that they did. Then we also have documents of a student's work. These are all types of data that teachers frequently collect. It's not a comprehensive list. So there's plenty more on there that we do not include, but just to get you started to think about what type of data would we be collecting as a teacher. So that will wrap it up for this section. And in the next section, we're going to talk about how you can manage high quality data. And that's a very important topic. In this section, we are going to be talking about how you can manage high quality data as a teacher and how technology can help you achieve those goals. So there are 3 keys to high quality data that are commonly cited when you look at different best practices online. And those 3 keys can be summed up by the acronym CIA. And that stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So with this section, we're going to dive into each of these 3 and talk about how technology can help you achieve each of these goals. So the first one is data confidentiality. And data confidentiality is all about making sure that your data is not seen by someone that is unauthorized, unwanted, illegal, Basically, it's protecting data from that unauthorized or unwanted access. So here is a great example of a breach of confidentiality. If you are a principal at a school and you have a binder with information about your students, and maybe there is someone visiting school that day that really shouldn't be seeing information about the students because it contains personal information like their birthday or where they live. And so it shouldn't be seen, but it's in a binder and it's on the person's desk and it's left open. And maybe the principal goes outside to get a snack from the cafeteria. And the visitor walks into the office and starts taking a look at the information. That would be a breach of confidentiality. And one of the challenges with recording data on paper is it's often very hard to make sure that paper isn't seen by the wrong people. If you have something in a notebook and you lose the notebook and it's seen by someone else, all of a sudden you have a breach of confidentiality and you have lost one of the 3 keys to keeping good data. So how can technology help? When you keep your data on a device or in a system that is password protected and you're not sharing your password with anybody, that will help you keep your data confidential. One of the questions you want to ask when you're using any system is this system going to keep my data safe and confidential? There are a lot of systems out there that may sell your information or may allow hackers to come in and access your information. So don't assume that everything that you put online will be confidential, but finding a system that you can trust and that is reputable and is used by other leaders in the industry is a great way of signaling if something is going to be a system that's going to keep your data confidential. So that's something to really think about, because as a teacher, you are keeping information about children. It oftentimes can be very sensitive information, right? So if you are keeping track of what their personal preferences are or what medications they're on, this is information that you should not be sharing. And so making sure there isn't any unauthorized or any unwanted access is really important when you're recording that data. Next up is data integrity, the I in CIA. And data integrity is about making sure that your data is accurate and trustworthy. It's great to write down lots of information, but what happens if you write down information that is incorrect? Well, all of a sudden, the decisions that you are going to make based on that data are going to be flawed and are not going to be based on data integrity. And one of the challenges with writing things down on paper is that it's very easy to accidentally write the wrong thing. And so if you record a piece of data on a piece of paper and no one is there to do any sort of fact checking, and no one can look back and see when you recorded it or cross-reference it with other information, you may lose that data integrity that is so critical. If you want to have trust in the decisions you make based on your data, you need to trust your data. That's why it's really helpful to have a technology that you trust to keep track of when you are entering in information, so you can look back and make revisions and see the edit history. One of the other elements of data integrity is preventing tampering, right? So if I enter in that a student failed a test and I write that on a piece of paper, you want to make sure that the student isn't going to come back and change that grade to an A. Or if you're scoring at 1 to 10, maybe they scored a 2 and they want to get to a 10. You want to prevent anything from happening to that data. And if you store it on paper, sometimes that can be challenging. But by storing it online, oftentimes you are better equipped to keep track of the trustworthiness of that data. And one of the things that we do at TheraP is we keep track of revision history. So you're able to look back and see what edits have been made to the data. And that can also help keep data integrity. The third key is availability. And data availability is about making sure your data is accessible whenever you need it. Let's say you wanted to do some work from home as a teacher. You wanted to do some lesson planning for the next day, but you record all of your information on paper and you left your binders at school. Well, your data is not available. So it can be the best data in the world. It can be extremely thorough notes and they are all correct and they haven't been tampered with. But if you don't have it with you, you can't make decisions based off of it. That's where data availability is so important. One of the challenges that we talked about before with offline electronic documentation systems is that it's just stored to one device. And if you're not with that device, all of a sudden your data may not be available. So that's another thing to think about when you're thinking about technologies to use to store your data. Is my data going to be available whenever I need access to it? So keep these 3 keys in mind when you're developing your data management system. Confidentiality, right? Am I protecting it from unauthorized or unwanted access? Integrity, am I making sure my data is trustworthy? And 3, availability, am I making sure it's accessible when I need it? Those 3 keys will help you ensure high quality data to drive your decision making. Now that we've learned about the fundamentals of data and what it means to keep track of high quality data, my colleague Shay Dotson is going to walk through what it means to keep track of student-centered data. So Shay, we'll turn it over to you.
Hello, my name is Shay Dotson, and I am so excited to be here to have this opportunity to speak with you about person-centered data. I'm here to discuss understanding person-centered thinking, practice, and data collection. This portion of the lecture is going to cover understanding what person-centered thinking is, what practice is, the philosophy as a whole, understanding the importance of person-centered practice in inclusive education, and also understanding how to discover and collect person-centered data, which creates a pathway for better IEPs. So let's start first with what is person-centered thinking, planning, and practice. Person-centered thinking is what helps us to establish a means for people to live the lives that they desire, that those that care about them have helped them to think about and establish what is good reason and good value for the life that they desire. As well, person-centered planning is then taking that shared vision that is created from thinking in a different way, listening in a different way, paying attention to what people hope, dream, and desire, and making a plan that assists people to construct the support that they need and to adequately describe the supports that are necessary for them to have the purpose and meaning in their life that they desire. And then from that evolves a person-centered practice. And person-centered practice is when we all in the support system for that person, whether they're receiving support from family or from non-government organizations, they are aligning those services, resources, and supports that give people full access to the benefits of living and learning and loving and experiencing life in their community, and ensuring that they have services that support them to the same degree that people who are living without a disability do, as well as helping them to achieve their own individual goals. So that's person-centered practices, and all of us should be involved in that as we are helping people who are living with disabilities to establish who they are and for society to see them as people of value. And so what is the importance of person-centered practice? At the heart of person-centered practice, and what we would call the why, is having a heart that values people for people. It is having a passion for helping people to discover their dreams, their hopes, their desires. It is having a passion for helping people to experience what is possible beyond the barriers that maybe society has put on them because of the disability that they live with. It is helping people go from just being present in their community, present in social settings, to actually contributing the gift that they were born to give to this world. And so in order for us to get to the why of being person-centered, the why of person-centered practice, it requires that there's a shift in our thinking. It requires that there's a shift in the way that we perceive people. It requires a shift in the way that we help society to embrace people who are living with a disability. The goal of person-centered practices is really to help people achieve their dream. And so when we're thinking about that word dream, we can think of it as an acronym. The D is going to stand for that we are helping people to discover what it is that they want out of their life. We're helping people to develop skills, knowledge, and abilities that help them go towards their goal. We are helping people define what quality of life looks like for them. And so for students, what does that look like, the educational experience that they want in their classroom? What are the supports that are necessary? The skills that they need to learn that help push them towards the life that they desire. When we think about that R, that's when we're helping people realize what are the realities of right now and what are the things that they can reach for? What are those things that they can go towards? And how do we take those resources to then build that person into what they want and to connect them with that goal achievement? And that naturally leads into A. A is that they're achieving the goals that they want by accessing the resources and supports that they need. And then M is that we're motivating people to reach for more, right? And all the while in this, in the middle of it all is that E, and we're helping people to engage around this dream that this person has to help them achieve what they want out of life. And so in the whole person-centered planning or person-centered practice process, it is the goal to look at the person as a whole, not to just focus on them as a person who has a disability, but to focus on every part of them. What does that person bring to the table? What are their abilities? What are their skills? What are their interests? How are their families involved? What are the values that they have? What are the goals? How do they want to be employed? Where do they want to live? And so really helping people to discover who they are. And again, how do we help build those skills, knowledge, and abilities as students, as people who live in the community to really help them get towards the goal of what they want out of life? So how does this now all connect with inclusive education? And where do we get the term person-centered data from? So as we think about the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations Education, Scientific, Cultural organization has developed, they have a goal that by 2030, that there will be inclusive education and equitable quality education for all people. That every person, every student has the opportunity to participate and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. That's their goal for what the education system will offer. And so overall, they want to make sure that every student has a quality educational experience and that no one is left behind. And in order for that to happen, it requires that we have a greater knowledge of the students that we're serving. It requires that we have a greater knowledge of what it takes to support them in a way that they can be successful in the goals that they're achieving, that they can be successful in the education that they are trying to obtain, that they can be successful in the skills that they're trying to learn in order to become more independent. that they have a quality experience in an environment that helps to build their confidence and build who they are and help them to move beyond the stigma of the disability that they're living with. And so in Kenya, the Kenya Ministry of Education also has a goal that aligns with that sustainable development goal that everyone is working towards. And Kenya has been working towards inclusive education being a part of their broader education system. And so the Kenyan Ministry of Education believes that education is the basic right of every citizen and that it should be offered for free in primary and secondary public schools. And so the goal in Kenya is to reach and support marginalized students so that they are empowered through education. Again, that they have a quality of life that helps them to then be contributing citizens in their own community. So in order for us to get to this, as I said before, it requires a discovery process in person-centered practices. It requires us to really begin to know and understand two foundational things. It helps us to discover what's important to people and what's important for people. And when we are providing supports for students with developmental disabilities or disabilities in general, it is important to have a balance between the two. When we think about what's important to individuals, we are thinking about what are those things that help them to be satisfied, content, comforted, fulfilled, and happy. And you can often see this in the people that they are in relationship with. Who are their family members? Who are their friends? You can see this in what helps people to feel like they have status and control over their lives, the choices that they can make, the activities that they can be a part of, the things that they like to do, the places that they like to go. What are those activities of interest? Maybe it's sports, maybe it's animals, maybe it's watching nature, maybe it's singing, and the places that they like to visit that bring them great joy. Paying attention to the rituals and routines, the pace of life for people, and the things that people want to possess or that they have that bring them great value. And then that is also balanced with what's important for a person. And those are thinking about those issues of health and safety and what skills maybe people need to learn in order to achieve the goal that they desire. And all of that can be uncovered in the discovery process of person-centered practice. That is what leads you to that person-centered data. So as you go through this discovery process, it really helps you to get to rich data that is going to help you develop stronger IEPs, those individual education plans for students. It's going to help you understand better in those rituals and routine what makes a meaningful day for that student. What really needs to be a part of that curriculum and the approach in their support that is going to help that person have more good days than bad days. What helps that student to be successful in their learning? What are the things that cause them to be frustrated and in fear and maybe paralyzes them in a place where they don't move forward, not quite getting or understanding what's being taught to them? And so understanding who this person is as a student helps to get over those barriers and push people towards success. It's also in this discovery process where you can understand the value of the relationships that's in this student's life. Who are those family members that really help that child to be successful, to really help that student to connect with life and connect with those learning concepts? What are the friendships that they're developing, and who are those people that they value that really bring a smile to their face and really motivate them? And then understanding how the students communicate. Is that through sign language? Do they have adaptive communication devices that help them to communicate with the world around around them? And what do you need to know as a teacher that's going to help you communicate those educational concepts that help build that person and build their skills? And also, what do you know about that person's personality that helps others to see the student's strengths rather than seeing them as a disability, to help remove the stigmas and the negative stereotypes? And so all of this can help you develop an individual education plan, an IEP that really suits the strengths of that student and helps to get them on the road to more success. In this person-centered discovery process, you can capture person-centered data that gives information to other students and to other teachers about the personality of the students, the likes, the dislikes, their strengths, their skills, their abilities, their hopes and their dreams for the future. And how do we begin to then build goals or IEPs, task-related goals in that IEP that helps build those strengths, skills, and abilities so that they are achieving the goals they desire, so that they're going towards their hope and dreams of the future. How do we know what activities of interest make a meaningful day for a student so it helps to keep them focused and having something to look forward to? Areas of needed support for skill development. What are those areas that are maybe a weakness for the student that they need a little bit more support to understand, or a skill that they need to develop in order to be more independent? What are those strategies that you as a teacher need to know about how to reach that student and how to truly understand them? And so in this person-centered practice process, this is the person-centered data that you can gather. And again, this information is going to help you build stronger IEPs. So I'm going to hand the presentation back to my colleague, Jeremy, who will lead into the next section that is going to speak about building IEPs.
Thank you for that presentation, Shay. I know personally I learn something new every time I get to watch one of your presentations. And for those of you that are watching, if you are interested in learning more about person-centered planning and person-centered practices, please reach out to us and we will help you find more resources on the subject. Now that we have learned about how to look more deeply and more broadly at students and understand their likes and their dislikes and their goals and thinking outside of just the classroom, we're going to take a look at the academic side of things, and academic side of collecting data, as my colleague Johanna Croft will talk about the fundamentals of building an individualized education plan. So Johanna, take it away.
Hello, I'm excited to talk to you today about individual education plans. So an individualized education plan or program is also known as an IEP. We're going to talk about what an IEP is, how to identify what students might need an IEP, how an IEP is created, and what the components of an IEP typically include. An individualized education plan or program is developed to ensure that a child with an identified disability who is attending an educational institution receives specialized instruction and related services. Some consider the IEP to be like a roadmap or blueprint for the student for their education. Initially established in the United States in the 1970s, the IEP has become an integral part of special education in many countries in the world. IEPs are an important tool for helping learners with disabilities to succeed and progress in school. IEPs are legally mandated in many countries, including Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. IEPs are becoming increasingly prevalent in other countries around the world, like Costa Rica, Malawi, Turkey, South Africa, and Uganda. In some countries, they're not mandated, but they're encouraged and considered to be a useful and effective tool in providing high-quality special education services. Not all students with a disability require special education or an IEP, but if a student's disability negatively affects their ability to learn, the IEP can be an incredibly important tool. Some of the signs that a student might have a learning disability include consistently getting poor grades, even if they're putting in the effort and seem to be really trying, needing step-by-step instruction, sometimes repeatedly, having trouble understanding the logic behind problem-solving tasks, having a poor memory for written or spoken materials, having trouble learning new tasks, forgetting skills that they have learned previously, significant difficulties with reading, writing, or mathematics, demonstrating communication problems, or becoming extremely frustrated with schoolwork and homework. So who creates the IEP? Ideally, IEPs are developed through a collaborative multidisciplinary process that involves parents, teachers, administrators, the student, and other support staff or service providers. Through the IEP process, the individual's needs, their learning goals, placement, related services, appropriate teaching strategies, and required classroom accommodations can be identified. An IEP can be developed on a paper form, in an electronic document, or within an electronic documentation system or software. Quite often, IEP templates are used to help with the format and structure of the IEP. So what are some of the components that you might find or might be included in an IEP? The format of the IEP may vary based on policies and requirements, but there's some sections that are commonly used. So one of the components is the current skill level of the student. So this includes a description of the child's current performance and skills in all areas of concern, and how their disability affects their progress in the general education curriculum. It's common to address academics, life skills, physical functioning, and social and behavioral skills, as well as any other areas affecting the student's ability to learn. IEP teams may use formal assessments to determine their functioning and to establish a baseline of performance. They may also use anecdotal information and progress data from the students' classroom teachers to further describe their skills. All of this is used to determine where the students' skills are currently. Another component is typically annual goals. So IEPs usually contain information about a student's goals, which typically need to be updated at least once a year. Goal statements specify what the student is expected to learn in the upcoming year as far as academic skills and relevant functional skills. The IEP often also contains measurable short-term objectives that will be used to measure the progress towards reaching the annual goals. Another component is progress tracking. This is an explanation of how progress towards goals and objectives will be measured, as well as how and when that information will be recorded and shared with parents and other team members throughout the school year. This helps to give a clear idea of when and how the students' advancements will be evaluated. The timing and frequency of progress tracking may vary, but it's typically structured around the school schedule. Another component is special education services. The IEP generally should include a description of the student's special education program, which has been designed to meet their particular educational needs. That can include details regarding specially designed instruction, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and any related services that the student will receive to help them meet their educational goals. Another component is duration of services. The projected beginning and end date of any services proposed by the team, including the details regarding the frequency and the location of the services to be delivered, is outlined with the intent to ensure that everybody on the team understands what, when, and where the services in the IEP will take place. Another component is participation in mainstream classrooms. Ideally, children are to be educated in the least restrictive environment to the greatest extent that is appropriate and possible. The IEP team will consider and indicate at what level the student will participate in general education programs with children in mainstream classrooms. Typically, the amount of time a student will participate in these classes and the explanation for that decision would be included in the IEP. This will vary depending on what services are available and how education is structured in the student's area. Another component is testing adaptations. The types of testing adaptations that will be used and why they are necessary, as well as if they might participate in any alternate assessments, is also typically included in the IEP. And another component, which is the last one we'll mention today, is a statement of transition. Typically, the IEP will also include transitional goals, services, and supports needed to help a student move from the school environment into a job, a vocational program, higher education, or other programs designed to promote independent living. This can include goals related also to self-advocacy or accessing community resources or services after completing their education. So to recap, some of the sections you would commonly see in an IEP are the current skill level of the student, annual goals, progress tracking, special education services, duration of services, participation in Main Street classrooms, testing adaptations, and statement of transition. So let's talk just a little bit more about specially designed instruction, or SDI. SDI is also known as specialized instruction, individualized instruction, or differentiated instruction, and it refers to the teaching strategies and methods used by teachers to instruct students with learning disabilities and other types of learning disorders. Educators and parents work together to analyze the student's work, evaluation information, and any other available data to determine the student's strengths and weaknesses and to develop strategies based on the student's unique learning needs. The teacher may adjust the way the student is taught or completes their assignment based on their unique needs. For example, a teacher may give a child with a learning disability a graphic, Venn diagram, or other visual organizer to help reinforce the concept being taught. For a student with a learning disability in reading, they might provide them with an audio recording of the material to listen to as they read along. A student might also be given additional time to complete assignments. SDI is determined based on the student's particular needs and strengths and therefore varies from student to student. Teachers continue to measure the student's progress and make changes in instruction as needed after reviewing how they're doing. And when the IEP team meets to review the IEP, parents, teachers, and other IEP team members may decide if the types or amount of SDI received need to be adjusted. The IEP, or Individualized Education Plan, is an important tool in special education. Using a team process to develop the IEP based on the student's unique strengths and needs provides greater opportunities for success and progress in learning. Thanks for listening, and now I will hand things back over to Jeremy.
Thank you for your presentation, Johanna. It's really important to note the different ways that you can use IEPs, whether it is for a specific subject, for building physical skills or life goals, and how you can track those measurable short-term outcomes to look at long-term goals and use data to power your decision-making. So with this section, I want to share some screenshots from inside the TheraP system to take a look at how technology can help you make the most of your data. So first, I want to talk about just a few characteristics of things that technology can help you with. Number one is that technology can do a great job for keeping your data well organized. And we talked about this a bit early on, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in this upcoming section. Also, saving time recording data by using technology, and then using technology to make learning from your data even easier. So what we're looking at now is an ISP program in TheraP. So in this case, it's called an individual support plan as opposed to an individual education plan. And if you look in here, you'll see there's quite a bit of different types of information you can enter in. And this is all optional, so it's up to you what you enter in. So we have the name of the program, but we also have the location, the long-term objective, the goal/service, the reason for the plan, and also the criteria for completion. So this goes back to what Johanna was talking about. You're able to keep track of what your long-term goals are, as well as what your short-term goals are. And if we look at our next screen, we have the different tasks. So in this case, we want to see how someone's progressing on reading, physical education, music, and arts and crafts. And we have next to the task name, the description. And that's a best practice. When you have a name for something and maybe a score, you want to give a brief description. So if someone is looking at this for the first time, they'll be able to understand what data you're keeping track of and what that data means, right? A score with no context is not very helpful. So here we have our description, and we also have our baseline score. And what's great with TheraP, with other systems, is you're able to create your own scoring method. So here we have excellent, good, fair, weak, prompt, and not applicable, but maybe you wanted to make that A, B, C, D, F, or you wanted to make it fail, moderate success, very successful, extremely successful, right? It's up to you. You can choose what that scoring method is. And that's how you build your program. And when we talk about managing and keeping organized using technology, what's great about this is you could go in and type for the name of the program, for the name of the student. Maybe you even want to look at what date you're looking at. And you can type that all in and you can search for it and it will show up. As opposed to recording it on paper where you then have to go through your binders and sort through and try to find what you've recorded. So that's one of the great ways that you can search and become more well organized and manage your data better using technology. Here we have a screenshot from when you actually go in and enter the data. And this is one of the things that we were talking about with saving time. One of the nice things about TheraP and similar technologies is you only really need to enter in the information once, right? So we created our plan, our program for how we're going to help this, what we're looking to track in terms of the student's progress. So for example, the student will be able to read some important information like signposts. That we entered in once, but now we can record this every day and it will automatically populate these fields. So it's going to save us time where we don't have to rewrite the same description over and over again. And now all we have to do is go in and choose a score and add a description if we would like. And we do that for our different tasks. And that's a simple way of updating your data about a student for the day. And what's great about technology is how you can unlock your data and make it easier to learn from. So let's say we've been entering in good data, right? It has integrity, it has confidentiality, it's accessible. We've been entering it in every day. And now we want to look back and see how a student is progressing over time. Well, using TheraP, you can produce a report with the click of one button. And you can look back and see what their scores were in different tasks over time. So we have it both by time, we have it by task, and we can see what their different grades are. Now, this is a demonstration account. So the information, again, is not real, and it may not be what you would typically see in terms of building to progress. But this is just going to show you, what it looks like and how easy it is with the click of a button to produce a report and look back and see the data. Think about doing this with pen and paper. If you're writing a score down every single day on a new piece of paper, how much time would that then take to compile it on your own? Probably a fair amount of time. And that's where TheraP and other technologies can help. Another great thing in terms of learning from your data is creating visualizations. So in this case, we want to see the green bar, which is for excellent. We would want to see that become larger and larger percent of how they are doing on this reading task. And so if you are interested, if bar graphs are something that help you visualize and see progress, this is a great tool where, again, you just enter in the information every day, click a button, and then you're able to produce these great bar graphs. You can do the same thing with line graphs in the system, where you can track the trajectory of someone's progress and see, is the line trending in the right direction or trending in the wrong direction? So these are just a few examples of how technology can help you unlock your data. It can save you time because you're able to just search for it by typing in keywords. So it can be typing in the name of the person that entered in the information. It can be the name of the student. It can be the name of the program, or even just the time frame. You can type that in and find it. You also have the ability to visualize data, so it's easier to learn from, and it will save you time because you don't need to enter in the same program over and over again and compile the results by hand. Instead, the system will do it for you. So those are some of the ways that technology can make your life as a teacher easier and also help you become more effective in learning from your data, like Johanna talked about with the IEPs. Now that we have learned how you can unlock your data using technology and help save time and become more effective with your teaching, we are going to hear from my colleague Alphonsus de Alban, who is the TheraP Global representative in the Philippines and the head of school at St. Philomena School, a special education school in the Philippines. He's going to share his real life experience on how they use technology to better manage their data and communicate and share information across their school and with the families of students that they work with.
I'm Al from St. Philomena School here in the Philippines. It is a special school recognized by the Department of Education. The school prepares students to become self-determined, have them engage in setting of goals, practice autonomy in making choice or decisions, and plan and reevaluate to help them keep up with the rapidly changing society. We aim to develop students who produce results, achieve all grade level standards, and master grade level competencies, preparing them to be a productive member of society equipped with knowledge and skills. In order for us to become effective and efficient, we must know our students, and one way of doing that is by looking at their history. The application form or input form, developmental profile, standardized assessment, all of these are important. So when given a chance or the opportunity, always let parents or caregivers know to put as many details as possible. This way, you can have a better idea on how to give proper intervention. Important details such as their age, height, allergies, behaviors, past hospitalizations, developmental profile, to the little details such as favorite toys or food, and even their dislikes. This will help us create an individualized education program and better plan for the individual's future. In creating IEPs, it is important to know your student. We don't want to do a hit or miss or trial and error. Create IEP based on all the information that you have gathered. Another way of knowing our student is by sharing information with parents, developmental pediatricians, psychologists, therapists, and fellow special education teachers, and all other service providers. As the saying goes, it takes a community to raise a child. In our school, we used to have folders and binders of our students being carried by their special education teachers everywhere they go, inside their classroom, on the playground, most of all, especially whenever they do community based activities. This is important as special education teachers. We must always have access to emergency information of our students. I say we used to because now we are digital. No more folders or binders. All the teacher has to do is pull out her smartphone and laptops or other gadgets, iPads, and check all the needed information for the individual. In our school, we use TERAP online documentation system. This platform allows us to share information of the individuals to those given credentials, such as their doctors or their psychologists, their therapists, and most of all, their parents, and take information to create better IEPs based on our collaboration with all the service provider. Embrace technology. Use this as an opportunity to better our skills and how we handle our special education students. Imagine taking control of the situation because you have all the necessary information from history of the child, profile, emergency contact numbers, allergies, adaptive needs. Everything about the child is literally in the palm of your hand. At the end of the day, as you look back and generate reports, it is always nice to get feedbacks from parents saying how they have full confidence in the school and the program you created and that they entrust their child to you. Always remember, in special education, documentation is a must. No better way of doing that than with TERAP online documentation, the leading system for service providers. Thank you for your time. From the Philippines, mabuhay. Be safe.
Thank you, Al, for sharing your experience. With this last section, I want to talk briefly about one of the points Al brought up, which is improving communication with better data management. And there are three main ways that we're going to talk about this. First, improving communication that you have with other teachers and members of your administration. As a teacher, you may only be interacting with a student during one small portion of the day. If you're teaching them reading, you don't know how they're doing in math, you don't know how they're doing in science, you don't know how they are doing in their other subjects. And if they are having poor behavior or some other challenge in your class, you will likely want to see if that's extending to other classes. By having communication, you're able to have a better understanding of how the student is doing in school. And communicating with other teachers will help you coordinate your approach and see if a student is needing a general lift in how they're doing, or if it's maybe restricted to just one class. Being able to share information with your principal or other members of the administration is also very important because it will help them evaluate your job performance, but it will also help them understand how the students at their school are doing. And that is very important as the principal. You need to set the tone if you are the head of the school. So I'll pause there. Another way to think about communication is communicating with team members that maybe are not school teachers or administrators. So this could be if there are therapists working at your school. We know a lot of schools that have physical therapists, speech therapists, behavior therapists, or occupational therapists, or other types of support workers that interact with the students either at school during the day or after school. They will have tremendous insight into how the students are progressing in life and the general skills that they are building. And they will also be curious in how they are doing in the academic classroom. Having that two-way flow of communication will both improve your supports and their supports, which will overall enhance the lives of your students. Last up, we have sharing information with families. This is something that a lot of teachers will sometimes overlook, but it is so meaningful for family members to get frequent updates on how their family members are progressing. So for example, if you are the parent, you really want to know how your child is doing at school, especially if they meet a child that has either a learning disability or a physical disability or some other form of disability. One of my favorite stories from my time working at Therap is hearing from a school in Bangladesh. And for a long time, they kept their records on paper, which made it difficult to share information with families. And so even though this school was located in Bangladesh, one of the fathers of their students worked in the Philippines and was living in the Philippines. And they said every week he used to call the school up and ask how his son was doing, because that was the best way for him to see how his child was progressing. When they switched to using Therap, they were able to share a Therap account with with the father. And all of a sudden, he was able to have access to his son's information. And every day he could go in and see how they were progressing on their IEPs. All of a sudden, they weren't getting phone calls every week from the father asking how his son was doing, but instead they would get calls saying, "Thank you, for the first time, I'm able to not worry about my son, not have any questions how they're doing, because I can just go in and see for myself." And that type of story pops up at a lot of different schools where you have systems in place to communicate with parents. Sharing information with parents not only enriches the lives of the parents and brings them tremendous amounts of reassurance and satisfaction, but it can also help you out because, as I mentioned maybe at the beginning of the lecture, parents will often have insights relating to what's going on at home in a child's life, in a student's life. And they are then able to come to you with information and maybe share it using your same system. So we'll have many schools that give accounts to parents, and parents are then able to enter in information which teachers can then see. And that will help make your job as a teacher so much easier and more effective if you have this holistic view of what's going on in a student's life, not just what's going on during the day at school. So with that, we're going to wrap up our lecture. I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you found this to be informative and engaging. Obviously, we all wish that we could be there in person and meet you all and talk to you in person and answer your questions. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we have to do this remotely. One of the benefits, though, is that because it's remote, we have been able to bring this team of people from all over the world together to share this information with you today. So again, I want to thank you all for attending. I want to extend, if anyone wants more information, please feel free to reach out to me, to reach us at Therap Global. We really believe in the importance of using technology for better data management. And what we've talked about today, whether it is about the 3 keys to achieving high quality data, whether it is having a person-centered approach to keeping track of data and building strong IEPs, or it has to do, or you're looking to unlock the power of your data using technology, or improve communication with family members or therapists or other teachers. These are all goals and passions of us at Therap. We really believe having better data management can change the world and can make the lives of people with disabilities and students with disabilities so much better. So in conclusion, again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. If you are interested in any of these practices and have questions, please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in learning more about the Therap Global System, also, please feel free to reach out. I will make sure you have my contact information, and feel free to contact me if you want to learn more about how you can use the Therap Global System at your school. So again, thank you all for joining and have a great rest of your day.